Have you heard of the Entrepreneurs Franchise 500 list? Maybe you've heard of it as Franchise 500, Entrepreneurs Franchise 500, Franchise Top 500. But that list that has 500 franchises has been around for over 40 years now. And in today's video, we're going to go through to see if it's a legitimate list that you can rely on to buy a franchise. So I mentioned a little bit of the history of this franchise list run by entrepreneur.com. Entrepreneur is a very popular publication for small business owners, would-be small business owners, as well as franchisees, principally in the US market. So a little bit about this list. So every year you apply as a franchisor. You can submit an application. So in a given year, there's 1,000 to 1,200 applicants that want to be on this Franchise 500 list. So you essentially have about a 50% odds to get on the list. So about half the franchises that are on the Franchise 500 list are included on it. So just being on the list means you're better than the guy next to you. Doesn't really mean that you're a top franchise, and they're not looking at the 6,000 plus franchises as registered in the SBA franchise directory. It's a much smaller target segment, which later in today's episode, we're going to tell you why that might not be good and why it's not a best practice just to look at franchise opportunities that are actively recruiting franchisees, potentially those that are going into entrepreneurship for the first time. Some stats just kind of set the context. In a given year, 2,000 or so franchisors are seeking franchisees to open up locations in the US. They're regularly filing FDDs with the different states that require registration, or at least having an FDD on hand for particular franchisees if there's inbound requests. Thousands of franchisors are competing for entrepreneurs looking to open a franchise. It's a pretty limited market. In a given year, there might be 20,000, 30,000 openings in a year. That doesn't include closures. When you combine closures and openings, it might be that there's only been a net growth of 5,000 locations in a given year for franchising. So these are just openings, opening 20,000 to 30,000 units. The lion's share, though, the big portion of those are going to go to existing franchisees. So imagine someone that has 5 Burger Kings and they're opening up 2 more Burger Kings. They're working with the same brand, they're already comfortable with the brand, and they're opening up more locations. So you roughly have 2,000 franchise brands looking for new franchisees with a limited pool of candidates. There could be anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 candidates that are actually signing franchise agreements for the first time to open up a new location, and then more that are buying an existing operating unit from a current franchisee in that system. So that is a bit about the franchise market as we've seen play out in the last few years. Now, Entrepreneur Magazine might receive 1,000, 1,200 applications for the list to be on the Entrepreneur 500, those top franchises that are the top 500 franchises as per Entrepreneur Magazine study. The issue is the top franchises that have opened or have planned to open several hundred locations oftentimes are not on the list. Why, might you ask? Because they're really looking for sophisticated operators, proven entrepreneurs, restaurant executives, industry insiders, or they just have so many inbound requests that they don't want to go through the application process to be on the Entrepreneur 500 ranking and potentially receive just a lot of inquiries where they already have their hands full. So thinking about some top franchise opportunities that haven't been making the list over the past few years is like Crumble Cookies, where they're at 500 plus locations. Essentially, you invest $300,000, and based on historics, you should expect to make $300,000. They are not on the Franchise 500 list. In my opinion, that is one of the top 10 franchise opportunities at this time in the United States. You also have Dave's Hot Chicken, which a lot of multi-unit franchisees are getting into. So think about franchisees that might have 5 Jimmy John's. They're signing up to take on big territories for Dave's Hot Chicken. Dave's Hot Chicken has commitments for 500 plus locations over the coming years, with many locations already up and operating throughout the United States. They're not on the list. Wolfgang Bakery and around 150 locations throughout the US, growing, amazing average unit volume. They're not on the list, as well as Seven Brew, an emerging coffee franchise. It's kind of been in stealth mode that's going to compete and has been competing, I should say, directly with Scooter's Coffee as well as Dutch Bros, which it seems like the model is pretty similar to Dutch Bros Coffee, which no longer franchises. So those are just 4 franchises that I assume did not apply to be on the Entrepreneur 500 list. And you're just not going to see those brands as top franchises per Entrepreneur's study. I think it makes more sense to have an analysis of brands where it's all 2,000 that are 2,000 plus that are seeking franchisees in that given year, and getting the average unit volume, estimating the average unit volume, payback period, what's the owner making, and also what the resale value is. There are a lot of brands on the Entrepreneur 500 list where essentially you might invest $100,000, but those franchises are for sale on sites like BizBuySell for $50,000, if that. So there's not great likelihood that you're going to get your initial investment back. And that's a huge red flag. So there's a lot of metrics that we look at when we're evaluating franchises, and we provide that to our vetted biz members, where entrepreneurs not really jumping in and diving into the details. And then you have franchises that are on the list, like say in 2021 and prior years, like 9 Rounds, where the franchisor is making millions of dollars while franchisees continue to close their fitness studios at a really high rate. So you have some brands that are just shutting down a lot of locations. And then you even have ones that are great brands and have great equity and people know about it, like McDonald's, that's regular in the top 15 over the past few years for the Entrepreneur 500 list. But McDonald's is in pretty bad turmoil with the franchise for sale rate at around 26%, which is 4x the industry margin over the past 3 years. And a lot of people are getting out of the franchise system, as well as McDonald's is essentially kicking out franchisees. And then McDonald's has a ton of pending litigation ranging anything from racial discrimination to not fulfilling its cybersecurity obligations. So a lot of bad stuff right now for McDonald's, particularly in the US, and they're still ranked in the top 15 on their 500 list, as well as many franchisees are upset at McDonald's, as they said they will not be renewing the franchise agreement for many of the franchisees. So think if you opened up a McDonald's 20 years ago, you were expecting to renew when your franchise agreement comes due, and they're not going to allow you to renew. So you have minimal rights. Essentially, they could buy the asset back for just a couple $100, and you're not going to get all that goodwill you built in the community and what the fair market value might be of a McDonald's, where if it's doing $3.5 million in sales, which is the average sales for McDonald's, you could potentially sell that business for $2 to $3 million. Where McDonald's, the franchisor, they have the right to buy it back at a fraction of that cost. Hopefully not, and it falls somewhere in the middle, or they offer the fair market value for that franchise. So essentially, the Franchise 500 list can be leveraged as a resource to explore franchise brands that are actively seeking franchisees, including those prospective franchisees that might not have industry experience. Maybe you might be a first-time entrepreneur. It's not a comprehensive list of all franchises available in the market, taking into consideration key factors that we look at for vetted biz, that you've got to talk and vet with actual franchisees. So we provide a lot of estimates, but don't take our word for it. Get that information from multiple franchisees, ideally 5 to 10 franchisees, before you sign that franchise agreement. So items like payback period, what's average sales per location, median sales, what's the owner benefit, how much money is the owner basically getting from the business, as well as what's the resale value, how much have recent franchises sold for in that system. Those are all key facts you've got to know before you sign up for that franchise. So Entrepreneur 500 list, if you're getting your feet wet into franchising, it is a source to review, and there's some great nuggets of knowledge there, and they have some great charts in terms of looking at unit count year over year for many large franchise systems, as well as emerging concepts. However, it's just one resource as part of your discovery to see if franchising is the right path for you. I hope you found this episode informative, and leave in the comment section what you think about the Entrepreneur 500 list. I'd be curious to hear from you, today's listeners. Thanks.